Do you think
Netflix is a luxury, gas
whatever,
cylinders
but
are
the
a
same. But
necessity.
hi everyone, welcome to today's video. So on today's video, we are going to analyze the budget. Ayushi is going to speak from the economic side of things. I'm going to speak from the stock market side of things. We are going to give you an entire update, whatever is happening and what are the key implications. So before we jump into the topic, we will try to make it extremely impolitical and all that stuff. So, अच्छे दिन आ गए after this budget or no?
उम्मीद पे दुनिया कायम है.
Okay, so with that said, let's get into serious topic. And Aishi, can you quickly introduce yourself because some audiences might be new, and then we will kickstart.
So, hi everyone, I'm Ayushi. I'm an Indian Economic Service Officer and I have been working with the Ministry of Finance for the last 7 years. I've done my graduation in economics from SRCC and then my master's in economics. I've also worked with the Planning Commission of India, so have been working in the policy making space for quite some time now.
All right, wonderful. So Ayushi will bring in the macro perspective on things. I will bring the stock market perspective. So hopefully this discussion will be practical for you. And also Ayushi is my wife, so just putting it out as a disclosure. Now let's kickstart our discussion. And the first key hot topic today is the tax rebates that have been given. So if you can help us understand the old tax regime, new tax regime, and what the current changes have been made.
So just to simplify, there was an old tax regime and a new tax regime was introduced in 2020. The primary differences were regarding the tax slabs. So here are two charts and you can have a look at those. The second difference was regarding the deductions and the exemptions that were offered in the two regimes. Old tax regime has more deductions and exemptions which you can claim while filing your income tax, and the new tax regime has lesser exemptions and deductions. Which regime is better for you is for you to decide. Talk to your CA regarding that. However, today's budget has made a major change in the new tax regime. If you adopt the new tax regime, earlier you did not have to pay any income tax up to rupees 5 lakh. Now that limit has increased to 7 lakh. So if your annual income is up to rupees 7 lakh, no income tax for you. So this is a good news for us overall.
Right.
Just quickly touching upon a very interesting economic concept called as Laffer curve. The Laffer curve is basically an inverted U-shaped curve. It basically gives the argument that the lower the tax rate, the higher can be the tax revenues for the government. So in this today's budget, we have seen that the income tax have been rationalized to a certain extent, and this can increase the revenue of the government in going forward. So this is another concept that you might want to read up more.
So de facto, practically speaking, would people benefit from this, and would they have more discretionary income now?
Absolutely. If you do not have to pay any tax up to rupees 7 lakh, this means that you have more money in your hands, you have more discretionary power, you can spend it as you like. So this will prove to be beneficial in the long run for the middle class.
So in this context, it is important to understand the implications for the stock market. So I'll just take a pause here and I'll quickly explain that. So basically, as the discretionary income means free income. For example, let's say that your salary is 1 lakh rupees and your kharcha is also 1 lakh rupee, then you're saving literally zero, right? That rent and all that stuff mein nikal jata hai aapka sara paisa. Now, since you'll have to pay lesser tax de facto, then you will be able to save some money. So let's say that you're able to save 5,000 rupees. So that becomes your discretionary income. Now, if you're an equity investor, equity means investing in stocks. So then this budget is somewhat useful or beneficial because people are going to go and spend money. This is also important to understand because in the economic context, it is said that Indian economy is driven through domestic consumption. We are a consumption-led economy. So as people spend more money, because they'll be having more money, they will spend it because of the increase in discretionary income. It is very likely that the stock market, at least in the mid to long term, is likely to rise. This is not a stock purchase recommendation, but this is an important point that you need to understand. So this brings us to a special announcement that we are running a contest today. You can win a cash reward of up to 30,000 rupees. We will pick 10 selected winners who create the best small cases as per this discussion analysis what we are putting. The detailed steps are presented in the description and comment box. So do go listen to this entire commentary that we are talking about. Pick and build your small cases of 5 key stocks that you will pick as per today's budget that are likely to rise. Then our team will go and evaluate your answers and we will announce the results the day after tomorrow, which is on 3rd of Feb. So with that said, let us share quick overall impressions about the budget. So these were 7 key priority items that were discussed in the 2023 budget. This looks like a random list of 7 key points that is discussed all the time. So why is such a list created in the first place? I'm not like 100% sure because these things, inclusive development, reaching last mile, infrastructure and investment, unleashing potential, green growth, youth power, financial sector. This is like true for almost all the budgets. Do you have anything to add there?
This is true for most of the budgets. Yes, that is true because these are the major pillars for any economy, for the growth of any economy. And these will remain to be the major pillars for the growth of any economy. These are broad mandates that are given in every budget. However, the targets that are set by the government keep on varying from year to year depending on how and what we need to focus on.
So yeah, true. The devil lies in the details. But in that context, it has been said that our economy is set to grow at 7%. We get very excited when we hear the word 7% or, economy ki growth hone wali by 10%. So how do we contextualize this number? 7%, 10%, what is that right number that we should get excited about?
So there is no right or wrong answer to this. It really depends on where your economy is. For example, during the pandemic, when the pandemic struck, the growth rate fell drastically. And rising from there, recovering through that phase, rising to 7%, it means that we are on a fast track recovery mode. Now 7% or the growth rate of any economy basically indicates how fast are we growing. So 7% in context of the economies or the countries around the world is quite a good number. Even China, which was one of the fastest growing economies some time back, has seen a decline in its growth rate and it has been worrying the Chinese government a lot. However, for India, if we actually achieve the 7% growth rate, it is going to be very, very useful for the long-term development of the country.
So Ayushi is painting a very optimistic picture. Let me also present a holistic picture. I can speak about like negative things. That's not an issue. So yeah, so please take it in the right spirit, so to say. So according to me, the 7% number is not just an external comparison. Ki China ki growth is happening at 8%, 9% or whatever that number is. And India is growing at like whatever percent. So that is an external comparison. But that 7% number or 6.5% number, it also is a rise. It's like saying this, that for example, let's say that you were earning 100 rupees. Then you had to, for some reason, downgrade your job. Then your salary became 80 rupees. Now next year, you picked up a better job and your salary became 90 rupees. So it went from 100 to 80, then 90. So will you be happy that your salary increased from 80 to 90? It will show as a positive growth rate, right? So that is how GDP numbers also need to be seen, that during COVID, the economy fell, the growth rate fell. And now we are rising at 7%. So that 7% context needs to be understood from that perspective as well. So all this data needs to be interpreted well. That is what we are hoping that you will take out of this conversation. So we should neither get excited too much that 6%, 7% growth ho rahi hai, and neither we should get bogged down. But definitely I do agree with Ayushi that our economy is a beacon of hope compared to other economies. So that's what my takeaway with this 7% number.
Absolutely. And you're right in saying that. But if we look at the absolute numbers also, so when you talk about 7%, it is a relative number. It indicates only the change from where we were at and now where we want to be at. Right? However, if you look at the absolute numbers also, GDP has increased from 2020. 2020, of course, was an abysmal year, which saw a decline all across the world. However, in absolute terms also, GDP has been rising, which is also reflected in the growth rate. You can see it from the graph here. This graph has been taken from the economic survey. If you haven't already read it, do read the economic survey. It gives you the report card of the economy, how the Indian economy performed over the last few years.
Well, I can give counter arguments to this also, but I'll stop because that will not be the focus of the case, but we'll give you a quick homework. So write that in absolute numbers. For example, it is like saying that my salary increased from 100 rupees to 120 rupees. You will feel very excited, but you also need to take a look at that at what rate the prices have increased and kharcha has increased. So please don't look at like, isolated data that, okay, our GDP numbers have increased in absolute terms, vagera, vagera. Look at also the price increase or inflation that is happening in the economy, and that needs to be contextualized. So just presenting the holistic picture.
Yeah, and there are different macroeconomic factors. Now, if we go into details for each and everything, then it will become too long a video. So you need to look at real GDP for that. For example, if you want to understand inflation also.
So with that said, let me speak about some good things that I personally found out from the budget. So 3 key things. One is that they started focusing more on capital expenditure. So that is likely to go up. I think the numbers say that they are going to do 33% more capital expenditure this year compared to the last budget. Second key thing is the fiscal responsibility. So fiscal responsibility means ki you're not taking too much debt. You're responsibly managing your budget. For example, again, giving you a very basic example here, that if your salary is, let's say, 1 lakh rupees and your kharcha is 1.5 lakh rupees, that is not fiscal management and good fiscal management. It's very commonsensical. So fiscal responsibility also becomes a burden of a government. So they need to understand how to responsibly manage the budget. So I think good data is coming out from there. And third is the moat or competitive advantage for any country. if we build our competitive advantage, if we do good things where we are winning. For example, if I'm very good in studying science and if I become a scientist, probably I'll find career success. Ayushi is very good in economics. She studied economics and she is finding good career success. So every country also needs to figure out where it is going right. That is called as moat of a particular country. So I feel that our moat is domestic consumption, that we are is a consumption-led economy. And if we focus on that and if we foster things around that path, we will achieve success. So any commentary on these three specific points and mandates discussed in the budget?
So the first point relates to capital expenditure. Now, what is capital expenditure? Capital expenditure is basically manufacturing or producing capital goods. These are the goods which can be considered to be assets for the economy. For example, if you construct a dam, if you construct roads, if you construct power stations, if you construct other infrastructure, these give us returns in the long term. When we are constructing these projects, we also tend to employ a large number of people, which means we are generating employment for those people and they are getting purchasing power, they are increasing their purchasing power. So overall, a good situation for the whole economy. So the government, I think, has increased its target of capital expenditure to 3.3% of the GDP, which is a very good thing, because this means that overall assets that are being generated in the economy will increase, employment would increase, and income levels of the people would increase. So this is regarding the first point. The second point is regarding the fiscal responsibility. Now, there is an act which is called as FRBM Act. It is the full form is Fiscal Responsibility and Budgetary Management Act. Now, this FRBM Act keeps the government in check, so to say, because it says that the fiscal deficit of the central government should not exceed 3% of the GDP. However, if you look at the data for the last few years, and I can show you the data here, in 2020, when the pandemic struck, government borrowed a lot to cater to the needs of the population, and that is why our fiscal deficit target was breached. We actually surpassed the 6% mark, and now government is trying to reduce it to 5.9%. I think that is the target they have set. This means that government is on the right path to reduce the deficit further. The third point is regarding the domestic consumption. Now, John Maynard Keynes, who is also considered to be the father of macroeconomics, said that if we focus on consumption, we increase the overall prosperity of the nation. If suppose my income level rises from 100 to 200 rupees, I have more money in my hands, I can consume more, I can buy goods that I want. If I'm buying more goods, that means that the industries that are there, they will have to produce more goods. This means they employ more people and the people who are employed get more wages, and the cycle continues. Now, India has been largely a consumption-led economy, as you rightly pointed out. We consume a lot, and that has been a major driving factor for the overall increase of the GDP of the country.
Right. So, ये तो सब economics related बातें हो गई. Now, how do we make money out of it? Let me just quickly share some understanding around that. So, one is that Aishi rightly said that the rate of increase of debt will be lower. Now, what does this indicate? This basically indicates that you might be reading right now that the bond market yields are high. Now, bond market yields are going to fall. Now, whenever bond market yields fall, the equity market or stock market goes up. So, this is generally positive news for the stock market. This also means that there is a likelihood that the interest rate now will not be increased at a massive pace, or they might even be cut. I'm just thinking it out loud with you. I'm not doing prediction, but this is generally how economics work in relation to the stock market. So this is again a very healthy positive sign. Regarding the point around moat or the competitive advantage for the economy, ours is a domestic growth led economy. We have not been an export oriented economy, and it is unlikely that anytime soon we will become an export oriented economy. So fostering domestic consumption becomes a key in terms of accelerating growth. And I think this budget is very positive from that respect, that people are given more money in terms of giving tax rebate. So that will foster good things in the stock market. So if you are an investor, stay invested, do not withdraw money. There can be short-term volatility, but generally be bullish. This is not the time to be bearish. So with that context out of the way, let us discuss the third key point around social impact and fiscal responsibility a little bit more. And one of the central messages that comes into the equation is कि यार सरकार बेकार की चीजों पे पैसे बहुत खर्च करती है, right? I mean, they keep on like rolling out like a bunch of other different schemes. They do a lot of subsidies. Now, subsidies can be highly debated. So here is a data point for you that as a percentage of central budget, how much subsidies have been given. So this is a very interesting data point, and the total comes out to be around somewhere around 10% of the total spend goes into giving subsidies. Over time, it has come down, it has risen up. So what is your viewpoint around subsidies? How much subsidies have been given? If you want to cover anything from this specific budget.
For this, I think first we need to understand what was the objective of subsidies. So subsidies were basically given to generally the lower income strata of the population in order for them to meet their basic needs. That was the primary intent of giving out subsidies. But if you notice, the subsidies have been reducing over the year. Government has been focusing on rationalizing the subsidies. For example, subsidies on kerosene is almost removed. Subsidies have been reduced for other food and fuel also.
But isn't like schemes where you get like free gas cylinders that will form a part of subsidy? No?
Yes, but Give It Up campaign was one such campaign which was introduced by the government in order to reduce that subsidy. So one of the targets of the government has also been to reduce the subsidy, and this is a part of the long-term vision of the government. So subsidies overall.
I'll just stop you there.
So subsidies overall.
Right, continue.
So subsidies overall may be considered as free lunch, and that may be true to a very large extent. However, that may be a necessity at some point in the growth of any country, because we cannot leave the poor section of the population just like that. So we have to cater to their needs as well. However, rationalization of subsidy is an important aspect which is being covered by the government over the years.
This is a theory, right? I mean, give it up subsidy. Now, how many of you have given up your subsidy on gas cylinder? I'll be very surprised if even 5-10% people would have de facto given that. So do you think that this type of measures would work? Is it not better to do this like, figure it out from the government end itself and give like lower budget allocation on these?
Absolutely. Subsidy budget has been reducing over the years, and when I said that the kerosene subsidy, for example, is almost eliminated, budget has been reducing. There are other factors, there are other nudges that have to be given by the government. For example, Give It Up campaign was a nudge that was introduced by the government in order for people themselves to understand that certain kind of subsidies may not be required by them. For example,
simple सी बात है, right? Practical point. यहाँ पे people who are being asked to do like that Give It Up campaign, those same people would be like stealing each other's Netflix password, or like the 5 of them will collaborate and take like each other's Netflix password, right? And do you think
Netflix is a luxury? Gas cylinders
but same people are being asked to participate in that Give It Up subsidy wala thing, no?
A lot of them have.
There might be, but it is. So yeah, probably we'll look at some data.
We need to redefine the definitions of needs, wants, and luxuries. Netflix is a luxury for most of the people, especially if you consider the population at large.
But I highly doubt it, that because you're asking the same people, right? I mean, people, Netflix password stealers that give up your subsidy. I don't think that is going to work out practically, but I would love to see some data on that. We have not aggregated it, but if you find some data, do comment. We will love to read your response to that. So yeah, before going on to the next point, I do agree with the fact that India requires a big social security. This is an important aspect, and access to food, access to free education, access to decent healthcare should be given. A long way needs to be traveled in this regard. So subsidies are important, no doubt about that. I 100% agree with that viewpoint. Okay, so now let's start discussing some sector specific points. One of the key things that has been announced in the budget is the energy sector grants that will be given and budget allocation around that. A lot of emphasis has been given on clean energy, green energy. So on that note, what is the vision like here, and what is exactly that the government is trying to achieve through this budget allocation?
These are part of the long-term vision of the government. Government intends to shift from non-renewable energy sources like coal, petroleum, oil, etc. to greener and cleaner energy sources such as hydroelectric, such as wind energy, water energy, so on and so forth. It is also in line with what are discussed in the G20 summit, for example. So this is one of the aims and objectives of the G20 summit, and government of India is also adhering to its responsibilities towards these initiatives.
Okay, so sounds again great in theory, but there is the practical money making point around it, that please don't go and buy like green energy companies that, right? I mean, please do a little bit more fundamental analysis, because there is an adoption curve on anything that new stuff is getting into. For example, these days you might have noticed that a lot of electric vehicles or electric vehicle scooters, they are blowing up, right? Because of the poor battery design, right? We keep on reading it in the newspaper. So these type of things, why is it happening? Because the adoption of electric vehicles hasn't really completed. We are not at that advanced research stage per se. So yes, a goal post has been set by the government that we would want to make things cleaner, greener, etc. It's good, no doubt about that. But from an investment point of view, you still need to consider the commercial viability of things. So unless that gets into the R&D space, we are at an advanced stage. Adoption is very massive. There is very clear cost advantage here, and we are in that mature technology space. Don't jump into investing side of it. I'm saying this because I got so many messages that, you know what, green energy का allocation हो गया है इतने हजारों करोड़. So should we go and buy like this green energy company? No, please study a little bit more and then make investment decisions. Okay, so the next sector we will touch upon is the banking sector. So do you want to say something on the big corporate who took a lot of debt in India recently?
That is your area. You may want to comment on that.
Sure. So I'm bringing up that topic, like rather less discussed topic, simply because of the fact that a lot of questions were asked that, you know what, a big corporate might go under and that will destabilize our banking system. But our banking system has been fairly resilient in this entire game. Just putting out a data point here, which has to do with PSU banks, that there are a lot of cleanup for PSU banks has happened since 2016 almost, right? After 2015. So that is good news. So how resilient do you think that our banking system is, and any new introductions that have been done in the budget on this front?
So no allocation has been done for recapitalization of PSU banks, which can be an indicator for how resilient the banking sector has been.
Okay, so that's a mouthful. So can you explain what allocation for recapitalization means?
Okay, so there is something called as non-performing assets. Now, would you like to explain non-performing assets?
So please, you go ahead and explain. People love your explanations.
Basically, what happens is that big corporates, they go to banking sector, they borrow money, and then they default on the loan that they have taken. They're not able to pay it back. Now, in this situation, banks are at a very, very difficult position. Usually, the government at this point intervenes in the banking sector and recapitalizes the banks so that they are able to pay back the account holders like you and I. If you notice, the gross NPAs, the gross non-performing assets, have been reducing over the years, and here is a chart to show that. This means that the banking sectors have been performing better over the time and the defaults have been reducing. Right. So banking sector is resilient in that sense.
Right. So you might now have a natural question that, hey, should we go and invest in like banking sector? What would the growth depend on? So the growth depends on essentially two things, or two central things. One is the NPA problems and the, you know, all the murky issues that happens with the bank. So as Aishi rightly pointed out, that the gross NPA has been coming down, which is definite good news that our banking is getting more stable with time. RBI, SEBI, all the other regulators are doing a wonderful job here. A second related point is that the banking stocks will move up because of this issue, right, which I'm going to speak about in a second, which has to do with interest rate cuts. So as the interest rate gets cut, usually it is seen that the credit flow in the economy rises, and that allows bank to lend money more and move money faster. So that is called as, in a way, multiplier effect of money. You can Google and read more about it. We will not explain it here. So that would lead to a stock price rise. Is it likely to happen? I would say yes. Again, that's not a recommendation that you should go and invest right away, but this is a phenomena that is going to play out. Probably I'll make a separate video on that. So the last point that we will quickly touch upon are some random sectors. That one is that sin tax in a way has been increased, that cigarettes are going to cost more. What is your theory on sin tax? Should it constantly keep on going up? How would you perceive this?
Personally speaking, I do not mind taxes on cigarettes or other such items being increased. From an economics perspective, increasing the tax rate can have positive effect, wherein, you know, it reduces the consumption of that particular good. It can also have a negative impact, wherein there is a kind of under the table or underhand economy that is developed, a black economy that is developed, wherein the items are traded illegally. So what impact is this increase in tax rate going to have? We have to wait and watch. But what is the effect going to be on the equity market? Over to you.
I don't smoke. Aishi, you smoke?
No, definitely not.
So we are not involved in, like, you know, consuming sin products, but as long as I get to make money by purchasing something like ITC, I'm happy doing it. Do I support sin products? Absolutely not. But that is not a choice that I have, right, in terms of regulating it. I would worry about things that are in my control. So I'm speaking from that perspective. Now, please do not go and invest in pure sin companies per se, in a way that, you know, companies only dealing with cigarettes, alcohols, etc., because the cost is going to go up in form of taxation. That's what I definitely perceive now. Now, ITC, on the other hand, is trying to become a very diverse conglomerate. They are reducing their dependency on cigarettes. So please go and analyze these type of businesses. That's what I would say. Again, there will be an updated video on the entire ITC scenario. But for the time being, just because these stocks are falling does not mean that you go and purchase them aggressively, right? So that's a simple message I want to give out here. Okay, so very quickly summarizing our entire chat, I will speak about 3 critical stock market related points from budget. You speak about 3 macro related points. So how about you go first?
So 3 good points about the budget. Tax rates have been rationalized and that is a good news for the middle class overall. We are happy about that. The second point is about fiscal responsibility. We are on a path of reducing our deficits, and this will prove to be prudent in the long term. The third point is regarding focus on domestic consumption and improving and bolstering the manufacturing within the country. This is again going to create larger employment and improve the income levels of the country.
Final 3 points from my side from stock market perspective. One, I think that banking stocks are going to do well from mid to long term. Short term, no one can predict the prices. Second key thing, that stay away from pure sin companies. That is what I would say. Rather go and invest if you want to build some positions in conglomerate. Third, do macro investing. This is going to be critical simply because of the viewpoint that at certain point the interest rates are going to cut, and that will be a great time that the stock markets will rally. On another note, my gut feeling says that we are very close to our bottoming in the Indian stock market. I don't think that the Indian stock market is going to aggressively fall. I'm doing stock market prediction here. That is not what the intent of the video is, but hopefully it gives you insights into how I'm thinking about stock markets and how you should think about it as well by analyzing the macros. Definitely do your own analysis, watch other videos, understand more about how this budget is going to impact, and hopefully you will be able to apply both macro lessons and stock investing lessons and make money in the process.
Please do comment on whether you like today's budget or not. We would love to hear your comments.
If you enjoyed the video, do consider pressing the like button and sharing it with your friends, and we will see you the next time.